I'm Corinne Cavanaugh, and you're listening to Lightning Speed, the podcast where marketing leaders who engineered revenue growth at Fortune 500 companies share the blueprints that help small and mid-sized businesses grow quickly. Today, you're going to hear the best advice from Greg Belkin, a product marketing executive and former journalist who spent 20 years turning some of the most technically complex products in SaaS and biotech into stories that buyers actually understand and sellers can believe in. At Jitterbit, he hit 120% of lead generation quota with a 30% year over year improvement. At ArisGlobal, he drove 25% year over year growth in China during a full international expansion. At Flosum, he hit 110% of lead gen quota, supporting the launch of multiple new product lines. He currently leads sales and marketing for a biotech company and is a fractional chief marketing officer on my team. If you are a founder with a technically complex product and a sales team that is working hard but struggling to articulate why a customer should buy it, Greg is going to show you exactly what's missing. Here's what I love about Greg. He came up through journalism before he ever touched a marketing deck. He knows how to find the story in a product that does not have an obvious story. And that skill is super rare, rarer than any certification or credential or AI gen content. In this episode, Greg breaks down the one positioning principle that works across every tech vertical, why people are not just buying your product, but buying a relationship, how product marketing owns the internal momentum that gets campaigns across the finish line, why competitive intelligence is a team sport, not a solo exercise, and how to adapt your core story to international markets. This one is for tech and bio founders whose product is better than their pipeline suggests. Let's go. So you come from journalism and research, not traditional marketing. Most tech founders don't trust marketing consultants, and kind of for good reason, right? Like there's a lot of bad ones out there.
Sure.
How does that background help you build positioning that founders and CTOs actually believe in versus kind of the whole agency speak problem?
hmm So, I think that the best product marketing is one that tells a story. For example, when I was at Jitterbit, which sells integration software, what we really wanted to do is build a story around its product lines. For example, we were selling into HR and selling integration that joins one piece of HR technology with another like expense management with compensation and time and attendance, and bringing all these HR concepts together. And one of the clear ways to win at that was to tell a story, and that's something that people can understand. People naturally like to be told stories. I tell stories to my kids all the time. And it's the same thing at work, and something that I, pick up from my time as a journalist. When I used to write for a technology magazine, I used to tell a story, about the cast, about the characters, about the challenges they have, about the options that they have, and about what they did to solve those challenges, what their benefits were as a company, and what their plans were for the future. And that is exactly the type of angle I think that works best with marketing and product marketing. Again, something that people can understand. And similarly, from a research perspective, so much work, the customer, the competition, the product, the industry, and it involves a lot of quantitative and qualitative research, understanding the metrics of what people are interested in buying, what the analysts are saying, what you're hearing just directly from an existing customer, what moved them. And that's the kind of research that I think goes on well. So again, back to my time at Jitterbit, building that integration story was based on telling a story from a journalistic experience perspective, and then going into these campaigns, having done the research, having done the homework, having analyzed the numbers, having had the conversations, having listened to the customer. It's all kind of built together. And that to me, I've found is a real asset.
Today, I'm talking with Greg Belkin. First question. You've scaled across DevOps, integration platforms, life sciences, localization, and HR tech. So many different industries, so many different types of tech. What's the one product positioning principle that works for every tech company, regardless of vertical? And what changes based on your market?
So first off, thanks for having me today. I would say that there are a lot of important uh, key concepts within product positioning, key principles, but the one that really sticks out for me is consistency of message. It's so hard to sell a message in the first place, to resonate with customers. It's a challenge, but the way to make it easier is to make sure that as an organization, your message is consistent all throughout the organization and is aligned with what the product's capabilities are effectively and accurately. And that really does two things. It helps prospects better understand the product and the product offering. It helps ensure that the prospect understands that you understand their business and feels comfortable with you. And secondly, it helps sellers sell better. It helps the sales team articulate a single message. It helps them learn faster and in unison, and it ensures that there's no mistakes when a an effort is out there in front of the client, so that there's no promises made that can't be fulfilled, and that it all comes together and that expectations are met post sale.
Yeah.
So consistency of message is so important. And at the same time, making sure that that consistent message is simple, direct, and aligns with what your customer needs. Now, on the same side, you asked about, what changes based on market. To me, the that is the consumption of message, the tactics. So much, if you have a consistent message, but can change, depend on your location, depend on the type of buyer, the type of person within the organization you're articulating the message to, the tactics change and the way that they consume information changes. So that to me is the part that iterates. But again, making sure that that key message underneath the tactics stays consistent. Of course, it's going to iterate over time, but it all iterates together all at once.
Yeah, I love that. And most people don't bring up the sales enablement piece, and it's so important. You see some of the bigger companies out there, they've got this locked. Of course, they can throw a lot of headcount at it, but even if
Hmm.
you're, in startup mode or mid-market mode, having those pieces so solid and all singing the same song, you could say, is
Right.
is really critical because people are looking for inconsistency, because they're skeptical, and why shouldn't they be? Love that.
Right, right. Right, and to your point, a lot of organizations are challenged with churn on the sales side, and so they need to get new executives up and running as fast as they can, and keeping the messaging consistent, make sure that they're getting the same message when they start, and it avoids a lot of confusion and it gets them in a position of selling faster and more effectively.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. So, Greg, your philosophy is that product marketing sits between product management and sales, providing the internal and external momentum needed to execute campaigns. Now, what does internal momentum really mean? And why do tech companies lack it?
Right. So when you execute a campaign, when you execute really any sort of initiative in an organization, and especially a B2B SaaS vendor, it's very complex. It requires a lot of people in a lot of departments working hard to solve challenges, get ready for a product release, get ready for a new product or a step incremental release, or just can be a presentation. You need somebody in the organization to drive the energy, the momentum. If people have energy and enthusiasm and momentum, they're much more likely to meet their deadlines and to do it, in a way that's going to go above and beyond. And when you're dealing with a complex project where there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of possibility to get bottlenecks, you need somebody with energy and drive to drive it across the finish line, somebody to bring it all together. And the way that marketing traditionally has behaved is that, we've been in the center of, working with sales, working with product, working with the CS team, working with executive management. So we're kind of in a unique position to own that momentum. And frankly, we have to own it. When we, are out there doing campaigns, we're judged. It's us who are judged on how successful the campaign was. And the only way to execute properly is to make sure that folks are all, operating and we're meeting our deadlines and the schedule is moving the right way. And you need sort of one sort of pivot point to keep the ball rolling and to keep the energy high.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is that rhythm of business that people really talk about, and having a champion of a really rigorous rhythm.
Mhm.
Everybody should be held to standards and very clear KPIs, and it's all pointing at revenue, and it's all very specific that every action you take within marketing or sales should be in service of
Yeah.
that, particular number that everybody's chasing after at the same time. The number and the story, right? The story that everybody's trying to make come true.
Right. And there's benefits for us too when you are, in the middle of things and you're successful. The benefit is, you know exactly what's going on. You become your own mini subject matter expert. You become your own release expert. And people around the organization, look at you and say, that guy, he knows what he's talking about. And that it helps your personal brand and it helps solve problems and it helps you engage faster. And all the other things that marketing does become much easier when you're in a position to answer those questions and execute properly.
Yeah, to that end, I think the worst thing that you can do when you are working with a marketing leader is exclude them from key conversations. And one of the things I just love is when not only is marketing driving the sales product conversations in partnership with those groups,
Hmm.
but they're also, taking responsibility for the P&L. And this is
Right.
kind of a controversial thing. Sometimes, owners and founders get their shoulders up a little bit around, don't look at our P&L. But, marketing, if you're doing it right, it has real top line, really bringing revenue, but there's also some costs associated. So managing those costs is a big part of the highest person in a marketing department. And so you got
Hmm.
to sort of let that transparency go. And you know what will happen is they'll take responsibility for it. And that's one of the things I just heard you say, we're at the center. We feel responsible. We're being measured in this way. So
Yeah.
having access to, being able to make the right level decisions to say, well, we did this initiative. It was successful. It might look good on my KPIs, but when I look at the expense line, it's kind of pulling here, here, and here. And so you can have a full picture executive decision-making conversation only if you have the full picture. So I love
Right.
that. Now I want to tell you about something that is directly related to what Greg is saying. The positioning, the pipeline, the story your sales team is telling. All of it depends on knowing exactly which marketing plays are right for where you are at right now. So when pre-seed or a Series A founder, Series B founder, all have completely different revenue opportunities and they need to focus on different things. Getting that wrong costs you time, runway, momentum. So I built a tool for this. It's called the GTM Roadmap. It's 10 multiple choice questions, totally free, no sales call or anything weird like that. You answer questions about your funding stage, your ICP, your acquisition system, your retention, your revenue, and you get a custom roadmap that I wrote, delivered immediately to you, has chief marketing officer level marketing advice, the same type of advice I give for my advisory clients. It tells you who your best customer is, where to find more of them. It tells you exactly what to do for your stage and your circumstance. So go take it right now at cac-media.com DTM roadmap tool. I'll put that link in the show notes. It's 10 questions, totally free. Back to Greg. Now let's get into the weeds. You built formal competitive intelligence programs at Jitterbit. Most
Hmm.
tech founders ignore competitors or they know they're adjacent, but they know their product is better, right? It's like superior product. And then they obsess over their competitors in the wrong way, right? Thinking about traction and different things. How should a tech founder think about competitive positioning to actually win deals?
So I'd say there's a few important concepts here. When I first started at Jitterbit, we did have win-loss sessions, but they were kind of one-offs, where, we would tell a quick story and, move on the next. And not tons of thought was put into how we formalize the program and how we make a competitive intelligence program a winner. One of the things we did was to change the way um, competitive intelligence was thought of. Competitive intelligence, in my opinion, is a team sport. There's no one person that's going to really become the one and only expert of competitor A, B, or C. And so the key is to make it a team sport, make it so that everybody is building the narrative, everybody is contributing to different knowledge centers. And one of the tactics that we used to make that a successful program at Jitterbit is we used a solution called Crayon, which is a competitive intelligence gathering vendor, which was really wonderful for us. What we did was we built some internal data cards that all folks could access and see and contribute to. And so we those cards also had information that was dynamic, that changed based on market activity, based on changing language on a competitive website. So there was static and dynamic information and multiple contributors. And it was up to product marketing and marketing in general to own that process. So somebody would have a tidbit that they would contribute and say, hey, Greg, we saw market activity XYZ. And then a couple other folks weighed in and we did some quick research and we realized there's a competitive nugget and we added it in. So we were kind of the gatekeeper of the process. But the key is to keep that process organized, keep it up to date. And there are a lot of different solutions, Crayon, and others that are out there that are really wonderful. And again, the key is to stop thinking about it from a sales perspective or a marketing perspective. It is a team activity and it is a team observation. And it is, brought in and contributed to by the sales folks who are seeing and responding to different activity with prospects, to marketing, who's doing the research, to different parts of the organization who are learning as they go. So again, keeping it a team sport is critical here.
I love that. And I love that you're using AI as part of this, right? So one of the some of the pushback that's happening out there in the wider world of marketing is, yes, we should be using AI. What can it replace? Well, if you're being strategic and these decisions affect how you position your entire product or your brand, you gotta see the intelligence. And I think it's wonderful that you're using AI in that sort of way. We think about AI as sort of an enabler of an infinity loop of learning. And
Mhm.
so this is one example of that, where you're saying, yes, a tool exists. It will help us gather and store and gain key insights. But what we do with those insights, which insights we choose to action on, are decided by a human gatekeeper or team of people that can look at the full landscape now that we maybe couldn't have seen before 5 years ago, and they can make really informed decisions. So I love that you built AI learning into your competitive landscape research for a technical product in that way.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny about AI. A lot of people have extremist thoughts where, they lean to say, oh, it's going to, take away my job, or, oh, it can't be trusted and it's not helpful. I'm kind of a center of the road type of guy where I think it has a lot of wonderful usages, but also needs supervision at the end of the day. So I think it's a tool that helps, but doesn't replace.
Yeah. You've expanded products into new international markets. There was one case where you did 25% year-over-year growth in China for
Hmm.
ArisGlobal.
Hmm.
Tech companies can often assume that good positioning in the US is going to work. It's typically their first try. They'll just say, let's duplicate this. It's not broken. Let's give it a try. So, what's
Hmm.
fundamentally different about positioning when you expand internationally? And also, I would love your specific experience in expanding into China.
Yeah, sounds good. So, Eris Global is an interesting case study because the organization started out in Europe and was strong in Europe for a while. And then they came to the United States and had lots of great customers there. And then the goal was to continue their growth, continue their expansion in China. And they play right in the life sciences space for clinical trial development. So the goal was to expand into this relatively new market and build forward. It's something that the company had done before. And of course, you're right that, when you build and expand in international markets, every experience is different. And so the way I think about this is, I think again, product marketing works best when you effectively tell a story. When you sell international, the fundamentals of the story remain the same, but the way you tell it, the details you include, the narrative are different. And that really requires a mind shift from, generalized value proposition to a focus on regional value prop and pain points. So you're taking what you know about the product, the strengths, weaknesses, and capabilities are the same, but the way you're telling that story about understanding the pain points of the specific market, and then also, the pricing and packaging, different regions are willing to consume software in a different way, and so you really have to be really knowledgeable about, what those expectations are. Data sovereignty and trust. Understanding, are you meeting the needs of clients, regional needs, benefits, and how it works, and future plans, tactics, and consumption of the information is really the variable that plays well. And to your point, there's a lot of experimentation done. You go in, you try to tell the story, you see what works, you see what doesn't, and you tailor the story to your needs. But you have to be very careful. There's a line you can't cross. You can't start changing, the what how you describe the product in terms of, what it can and cannot do. Again, the fundamentals of the story have to remain the same, the messaging, but at the end of the day, the bits and pieces that you include in the story, areas that you tend to focus on, are different, and the way they consume information is different. The other thing that I would point out, which I think is really important, is trust, both internal and external. And I bring this up because it's a forgotten piece of the puzzle oftentimes. At Eris Global, we had a team in China, a very small team of 3 or 4 folks who were there, to kind of warm things up and, you know, give us a good understanding of the marketplace. But we weren't always on the same page in terms of support for that team or making sure that that team had everything that they needed from a collateral perspective or support perspective, making sure that they were in tune with information as it rolled out. So, one of the things we are very, very careful on is, again, building trust in the team and making sure that they knew what we were working on, understanding what their needs were, providing for them, working hand in hand on specialized content, specialized campaigns, and then similarly, external perspective. There's when you sell into, for example, China for Eris Global, there's not, a tremendous user base. So people look at the company as somewhat of a new organization, and you counter that and say, oh, well, we've been in business for 30, 40 years. and and we've been very strong in Europe and the United States. But it's important to remember that that you kind of have to reintroduce yourself, reintroduce the brand, and build that trust externally as well.
Here's the line from Greg I want you to carry out of this episode. People are not only looking to buy products, they're looking to buy a relationship and support and handholding. That's the whole game for complex technical products, not more features, not a better demo, a story that makes a buyer feel understood, confident in the product, and confident in the people selling it. Get that right, and leads, pipeline, retention, all of it follows. And his consistency principle is one I think about a lot. It is so hard to sell a message in the first place. The last thing you want is your sales team or BDM, your product team, your marketing team, each telling a slightly different version of the story. It should be one story told consistently. That's the foundation. Greg is a fractional CMO on my team and one of the sharpest product storytellers I know. If your SaaS or biotech product deserves a bigger market, he is the person I would call. Share this with a founder whose pipeline does not reflect how good their product actually is. Growing a company is lonely work, and they will be so glad you thought of them. I'm Corinne Cavanaugh, and this is Lightning Speed.